how do these domain names work in Australia? When we talk about domain names, we're talking about those .coms, .aus, .net.aus, .gov.aus, pretty much the names or the addresses that appear in the search bar when you're putting in an address for a website. They work in remarkable ways, and basically how they work is they're like an alias that goes to an IP address, and an IP address or internet protocol address is those things you look at like 203.27.17.199. Those kind of addresses, if you've ever come across those before, they're a real address of a physical server inside a data center somewhere that contains information about a website. Now, the real address for a website is usually something like that. It'll be something like 207.17.19.199 / squiggle and some kind of username, which is usually related to the username that the company uses on that server, which could be their company name. It could be George. It could be Patricia. It could be anything at all. It all comes down to the way it's originally being set up. A domain name then becomes an alias to that, a much easier to remember alias, which says, okay, I'm going to put in mydomain.com.au, and it's going to point to that long, complicated, number-filled name that's much, much harder to remember. The new domain name being either a real world name, it could be, I don't know, realworld.com.au is going to point much more memorably to that address on a web server. So the idea is to get something people are going to remember a lot more. But how do these actually work in Australia? To understand that, we break down three very different kinds of domain names. Now, there's generic domains, which include .com, .net, .org, might also be .id. They're very, very generic because anyone can get them anywhere across the world. You don't have to be in America, UK, Ukraine, Russia, or China. You can just be anywhere you like and register those domain names with that suffix on the end. The suffix is the letters on the end. So you got the top level domain, which is like usually your name of your like the com. So the .com, and then there's the .au. Now the AU is what we call a country code. So AU for Australia, NZ for New Zealand. They use a variation of just plain .nz addresses or .co.nz addresses or .gov.nz addresses. In other countries, that could be something like .ca for Canada, which they don't have a top level domain. They just have a country code because most Canadian businesses tend to use a .com if they've got it available to them. So those are available to pretty much anybody at all. You don't have a lot of qualification criteria to get on there, as long as you're registering it through an approved registered domain name provider. The next up is premium domains. Now, these are very similar to the generic domains, but usually a bit more fun. They ended with things like .xyz, .media, .music, .parachute, .pilot, lots of job and industry related top level domains. Instead of country codes at the end, they have an industry or they have some kind of word. It could be something that's indicating an affiliation with a particular it could be .summer, it could be .spring, it could be .fun, anything like that, .professor, .professional. There's all kinds of words are being added in there. So it then expands the amount of suffixes that can be used. So if you've got yourdomain.com, you might also have yourdomain.com.au. You can also get yourdomain.media, yourdomain. And whatever else comes against your particular industry. Let's just say if you're working in home, lifestyle homewares and things like that, you could have mystore.homeware, if that is available right now. Now, not all words in the English language and other languages are available just yet, but they are becoming more available. Excuse me, becoming more available as time goes on. So there's been more and more and more and more words, till eventually there's not going to be a lot of limitations on what you can register yourself as. And the third one is national domains, which we've talked about, the .aus, the .nz, the .tv, which is Toodaloo, by the way, .ca, which is Canada, or .au, which is Australia, or AT, which is Austria. So generic domains, anyone can register those. We covered that. And they're limited to just .com, .net, .org, .gov, .edu, and .mil. .com is generally for companies. That's what it's for, commercial. .net for networks. So a lot of internet service providers in the early days didn't have a .com, they had a .net. .org is for not-for-profit organizations, even though you don't necessarily have to go to a lot of trouble to prove that for a .org. But if it was a .org.au, that would be a different story. .gov is limited to just American government institutions, so that one's particularly related to just American. .eu for American educational institutions, so I don't say that 10 times fast in a hurry, educational institutions. And .mil used to be for any sort of military application, but it now really is limited just to the US military. So you find that the Marines would have marines.mil or .gov, or have a mil version of that. You do have to use your real contact details. So there have to be contactable details, a contactable phone number, a contactable email address. But those registrate details can be made private on generic domains. So you can use domain privacy, which is usually an extra service that domain providers will use, and they will allow you to hide who you are, who's registered that. So even though the domain registrar and a government who asks can be given that detail, but the general public can't just go and search for that. They can't search for it on what is called a whois search, which just there's some really interesting ones like whois.sc, which is SC is the country code for the Seychelles. It'll be whois.sc, and you type that in, and then you put in, okay, what's this particular address and who owns it, or who at least registers that. And it'll give you back some information about that address on who it's registered under. Now, if you have domain privacy under these generic domains, that information won't be available to the public. It's not publicly available, which is kind of cool because if you're like me and you buy a lot of domain names, what ends up happening is that every time you book a domain name, it ends up generating about 50 calls a week from people offering to design your next website, usually with South Asian accents from call centers in other countries. So you'll be annihilated with people who want to do your website for you, or SEO for you. They want to do your social media for you. You're just basically inundated with all these people. Now that's a problem simply because it's spam, and they can only get that information because on .com.au addresses, that information is public. Or you, on a generic domain, have decided not to hide that. You've decided not to take advantage of domain privacy. Should you do domain privacy from these? Absolutely. I think when you look at it from generic domains like .com.org, .net, any of those, I would put domain privacy on just to protect yourself from those relentless phone calls and emails that just keep on coming. But when you go to Australian domains, that all changes. But first, before we do the Australian domains, we'll have a look at the premium domains. And these are the ones where the premium or fun domains, sometimes they're just fun ones. Anyone can register them anywhere in the world. They've got lots of weird and wonderful ones, .research, .crypto, .marketing, .media, lots and lots. There's like dozens and dozens and dozens of these words. And by probably the end of 2022, there'll be hundreds of these different options. And it's really hard to find a place that actually registers all the different options because a lot of those domain registrars only hold the most popular ones. Now, the registrant details on these can be made private as well. So on generic domains and on these ones, you can make them private because that's a worldwide thing, and it doesn't necessarily, it's not something which necessarily comes with regulatory pressures like the .au addresses tend to. So premium domains can be less than a domain. Like for instance, at a bulk price, I will look at these generic domains and can buy those between $9.90 a year up to about $20 a year, depending on the different registrars you'll use. Sometimes $36 or something like that for a .com, .net, or .org. When you get into these premium domains, some of them are very premium. So they're ones that are under a lot of demand. So you're looking for a particular name that's quite common with an ending that's quite in demand, where you can get up to the thousands of dollars per year for one of these. That said, though, most of them are going to cost you probably less than a generic domain. They're not going to cost you very much at all. So .media, .marketing, and .research, .crypto. .crypto is very much in demand at the moment, but something like .research, probably not so much demand. So you can probably get something a lot cheaper there. When it comes to Aussie domains, though, it's a very, very different kettle of fish. There are different rules for different companies, and in Australia, it may include .com.au, .net.au, .edu.au, .gov.au, and in 2022, it also includes just the plain .au. One that's missing from there is .id.au, which is for individuals. Now, every country has its own domains. You'd have AU for Australia, New Zealand, NZ, CA for Canada, Tuvalu has TV, FM is the Federation of Micronesia, JP for Japan, CN for China, and UK for the UK, obviously UA for Ukraine. So lots and lots of different countries have it. RU is the Russian one. You'll see a lot of unfortunately, a lot of really dodgy things come from .ru domains. So I generally, if I ever see any of those, I just avoid them altogether, because the chances are it's probably going to be trying to deliver malware. Unfortunately, that country is responsible for 75% of all malware and attempted intrusions through cyber warfare. So in Australia, we have particular rules for these domains, and they're things that, if they're called upon, they can actually have your domain taken away from you if you don't match those rules. And the organization that covers that is called AUDA, or Australian Domain Administration, and they handle the industry to do with selling domain names, allocated domain names, disputes on domain names. For instance, if I think I should have it, but someone else does, there's an avenue for dispute there that obviously follows some very defined rules. So the rules of Australian domains are kind of covered in the fact that you, number one, need to be based in Australia. So if you're an Australian citizen, Australian company, an Australian individual, then you're already halfway there to securing your .au domain. So first of all, the requirements will be that for a .com.au, .edu.au, .net.au, you need an Australian business number. So an ABN is required, or an ACN, something like that, some kind of business registration number, which is going to be able to be queried against the database to prove that you are actually that person. Now, bearing in mind, you don't have to prove that you are the person who holds that particular ABN. So I can go in there, essentially request a domain name for, I don't know, coca-cola.com.au if it was ever still available. And then I can register it under the Coca-Cola company if I want to link it and be approved for it. But the problem would be that once Coca-Cola finds out and they go and look for that, then they'll go, well, we're suing you and we will get that brought back to us. And because of the power of their lawyers and the fact that they own that trademark, not just the logo, but the name Coca-Cola, they will win that and they will be taken back off me and given to them. So the name needs to be demonstrably linked to your business name or activity. So for instance, if you wanted to go toysrus.com.au, that would either need to be your business name, Toys R Us, or maybe have to be somehow related to what you do. You sell toys, whether they're kids' toys or adult toys, that will give you a head start for that. The same thing is if I'm booking something like, for instance, my business name is Clickstarter. So to get Clickstarter, I don't really necessarily have to prove that I have the Clickstarter name in what I've registered, but I just have to have an ABN that will usually get me across the line. Then as part of the sign-on for a .au domain name, I then tick a box at my registrar saying that I do have a link that's demonstrable and justifiable for that particular domain name that I'm registering, even if it doesn't appear in anything to do with my business name registrations or my ABN or my ACN or any of those numbers. I can still put it through, but I've got to understand that at some point, if that gets contested, I'll probably lose that unless I can prove that there is a link between that and my businesses. So the safe way to secure your name in here is, and to not have it taken off you, is to go, my ABN is on there, and linked to the ABN is the business name that I'm trying to register. So if it was, I know, banknt.com.au, and I haven't yet registered that as a business name, to be safe, I'd want to go and register that as a business name, because not only do I have an ABN, but that ABN is then linked through to the banknt.com.au domain, because it's linked through to the banknt name of business. So there's an inextricable link between them that can be proven and shown. The problem is with Australian domain names, is that they're not private, and you can't make them private. You can register them against it has to be a real person's name, a real person's phone number, and a real person's address that it's registered under. And that information is not private. That information is for public record, because there needs to be proof of who it is that registered a particular name. Now, for privacy reasons, that may not seem great, but it's really made for businesses to be able to say, hey, we're real, we're legitimate, we're within Australia. So what you would normally do is put down your business address, which hopefully, if you don't have a business address, my advice would be to get a post office box address. I know that seems like an extra cost that seems ridiculous, but trust me, if you live in a standalone house and you think that somebody is going to go after your business in some way, this is one way they can look that up. They can look up your address. I've done it myself before, and I've needed to send mail or a package to someone whose address I didn't know and I couldn't get a hold of. I just looked up their domain name, and sure enough, there was their address, so I could post it to them. At the same time, it has things like phone numbers. So that's how, for instance, every time I register a domain name, because I have got a legitimate phone number against my domain name registrations, you can actually get me on the phone through that. So I don't answer those calls, because I only answer calls that I recognize, like my mum, for instance. But it's something which you may want to bear in mind. If privacy is really important to you, you may have to look at a way around this. You probably shouldn't be, you can, but you shouldn't put down a fake name, because if, for instance, someone can test that domain name and it's showing that you have a fake name, a fake address, a fake phone number, they can't contact you to tell you that that name's being contested, and it can be taken away from you simply because you haven't responded to those things. So those contact details are really super important, because when a contesting name comes up, if you've registered something that someone else holds as a trademark, or they think they should have it instead of you, you want to know that someone's actually going to answer, like, get to you. So if you don't have a live email address, a live postal address, and a live phone number on there, you will never get that call or that message, and you may lose your domain name. So look, it very rarely ever happens. It's an incredibly rare thing to happen in Australia. That said, you don't want to be the test case. So extra requirements come into place when it's things like .edu.au. You have to be a registered and accredited educational institution, like a registered training organization, a school, university, all those kind of things. So making sure that you have those relevant registrations so that you can then show that you are an actual educational institution. Someone who's a life coach who has an online academy is not an educational institution. That's not a registered government accredited educational institution. .gov.au, obviously you need to be a local, state, territory, or federal government in Australia, or an agency within those governments. So that's another area where, edu and gov are probably not going to affect any of us. Where we might find is an ASN, which is an association, which must be a not-for-profited or unincorporated association. So we get that a lot with soccer clubs, a lot of not-for-profit entities that are club-based, sports-based, activity-based, rather than charity-based necessarily. .org.au generally tends to be charity. So again, not-for-profit entity, but it tends to be more charitable organizations rather than associations such as local sports club and whatnot. An ID.au, so .id.au, is a legal name. So to get my name, Dante St. James.id.au, I have to provide proof that this is my name. So I can put in my driver's license number, my passport number, that then equates to the form of identification I'm using to prove that I am the person who should get that domain name. It can match a legal first name or a surname or your full name in there. So you can go for all of those. As long as you can prove that you have the right to hold that and it represents your first name, your legal name, or your surname, then you have a claim for that. If someone else has the same name, obviously if they booked it before you and they've got a claim for that, then you can't claim that off them because they also have a valid claim for that. First in, first served in that case. Which leads us to these new domains. So they're the direct domains, the .au. So instead of something like me having clickstarter.com.au, I can just now have clickstarter.au. And this, like all the other .au domains, means you have to have an Australian presence. So you have to show that you're Australian, you have to have an ABN, all that kind of stuff. And it's allocated then according to a priority system. So what's been agreed to, and I was part of the vote for this as my membership of AUDA, the Australian Domain Administration organization, is that those who currently have the .com.au or the .edu.au or the .gov.au or the .net.au or any of those get a 6-month grace period with which to pick up the .au version. So I'll repeat that again. If you've already got the .com.au or the .net.au or the .gov.edu or any of those .8 before the .aus, then for you to claim the .au, you have a 6-month grace period. So for instance, you can't go and book my clickstarter.au one because it's held specifically for me because I'm the registrant of .com.au. Now, somebody may go and get .net.au and beat me to that. So what will happen is if I put in a claim and say, no, they only just put in the .net.au yesterday, and I've had the .com.au since 2016, then I will win that because I have the longest continuous version of that with a .au at the end, but as a .com or a .net, whoever was first, really. So the example would be that, for instance, if these priorities being all around you holding the domain name in another .au namespace, so .com, .id, etc., then you'll be able to apply for priority status to register the exact match in .au. And that's only for the 6-month period from launch. When was launch? Last month. So you've got 5 months to go. So March was the launch. And I saw when I was in Sydney during the week, and also in in Brisbane the week before. There's a lot of billboards with the .au stuff around where people are being advertised to now. So for instance, if you do have a .com.au or a .net.au, you want to get your .au, I would probably suggest you get that now. Get that as soon as possible. I'll be applying for mine this week. So I'm actually waiting for a particular invoice to get paid so I can go and buy many of the .aus that are associated with the .com.aus that I already hold now, because I want to secure them, because obviously I don't want someone else getting the .au version of my brand, but that would be silly. I don't want someone else to go DanteStJames.au, and that's my name. That's who I am. That's what my brand is. So to get that, I need to apply for the priority status for the exact match before the 6-month period is up. So 6 months, so it's March, April, May, June, July, August. So before September, you want to have this in hand. You want to make sure you've secured this if you already hold a .com.au. So for example, if you want to see how the priority works, Min registered domain.com.au on September 12, 2002. Anna then registered domain.net.au on March 12, 2021. Min has decided to apply for priority status, and so has Anna. So between those now, the domain authority, the domain administration, AUDA, will now award that to Min, because Min has held his .com.au version for much longer than what Anna's held the .net.au version. So is that fair? Well, it probably is, because Min has got the longer association with that domain name than Anna does. If Anna wanted to get something similar to that, she would have pretty much no reason to get to win that over him, except for instance if she held the maybe the trademark for that word. If the word is trademarked, she may have a case that could be answered. Whereas Min may have held it for longer. She holds the trademark for the word, and that would have to be, though, a trademark for the word, not a trademark for the logo. So why would you register domains to protected brands? Because you don't want others being able to cash in your good name. So the other suffixes, or the suffixes, some people like to say at the end, are things like, going and making sure you've got not just the .com.au, but get the .net.au as well. Get the .au version, get the .com, the .net, the .id, the .id, all the different versions that are the most basic ones. Get them as well. And I always say to my clients that if you can get the .com.au and the .com, get both, but then also pick up the .net and the .net.au. Now you can pick up the .au. Pick them all up as you can in those most common ones. I'm not talking about going to all the other weird and wonderful ones like, these Other countries, for instance, if you're looking to operate in Indonesia, .id would be very useful for you. If you're operating in Canada, .ca. If you're going to France, .fr. Or .co.uk. If you're looking to operate in the UK, that would be important to go to those other countries and get those other domains. But unless you're really looking to operate in those countries and you want to protect yourself for maybe the future where you may operate in those countries, remember too that you can't just get a .co.nz one. .co.nz requires you to be a registered New Zealand business. In the case of .nz, because they've got the same as we've got, they've had it a lot longer than us though, you can get a .co.nz only if you're a New Zealand business, but you can get a .nz without being a New Zealand business. So for instance, Clickstarter is based in Darwin and Northern Territory. I could book a .nz version of that, and I have owned the .nz version before because I was potentially looking at operating in New Zealand. I can re-register at that again, but I can't get a .co.nz because the .co.nz is saying that you have you have got an actual presence in New Zealand and you're a New Zealand company. Andrew's just asking the difference between .co and .com. It just comes down to whatever really suits you best. In most cases, people will choose a .co because the .com is gone. There's not really a grand difference. There's no real preference for it. SEO doesn't really care. Your position on Google is not going to be hinging upon that. It's just what makes some more sense to you. In Australia, we've got .com.au, in New Zealand's .co.nz, and the UK is .co.uk. Some countries have com, some have co, some don't have it at all. For instance, Indonesia is based upon just .id, and in Ukraine, it's just .ua. But in Canada, it's just .ca. They don't have prefixes except for the government, which has .gov.ca. So you've got very different setups in different countries. So it's really up to you what you prefer out of .co or .com. And if both are available, go for them both if you can. If only got .co is available, great, just get that. Just realizing though that a lot of the time when you tell people your web address, and they're just inevitably probably going to type in the .com, not the .co. So you may have to be very, very careful with making sure you really articulate what your address actually happens to be. Your other ones might be trademarks. So if your name is trademarked, you may have a claim to a particular name within Australia if your name is trademarked within Australia, but it has to be the word. It can't be just the logo. For instance, I cannot register a trademark as Clickstarter because it's two common words smushed together. So the words I can't register as a trademark because they're just common words of the English language. What I can do though is register my logo. So my logo can be Clickstarter written in the Nexa font is regarded as being my trademark. Now I can say that that's trademarked, and I might go to AUDA and say I have a trademark, I should be able to claim this, and I'll go, no, you have a trademark for the logo, not for the actual name. And that's where many people get confused, that they trademark their logo but not the name of the business. You also get no claim in other countries unless your trademark is registered there. So for instance, someone could pick up the .cn domain in China, but if you haven't registered your trademark in China, then they've got no reason to protect your trademark in China because you have never registered your trademark there. It could be in something like, for instance, it could be anything like America, for instance. Just registering your trademark in Australia doesn't necessarily register your trademark in America, and in fact, it doesn't. We might have like free trade agreements and sort of a lot of different ways of making sure that we sort of do the right thing between us and to Americans and Americans to us, but not really. It doesn't really give us the idea that we can actually claim that trademark. We have to register it in that other country. So if you want to be protected in Canada, register your trademark in Canada. There are international trademarks you can register, but not every country will recognize those. And I think particularly America, you really need to go and get that through the American relevant authorities in order to claim that trademark. So it's pretty much, they're going to just give you the flick because you don't really have that. All right, next up, apart from our trademarks, is looking at our social media naming. And this is probably not covered by as many legal protections. There's certainly no Australian Domain Authority protecting this kind of thing. This is going to be really, really up to you to maintain this yourself. And a lot of people don't even realize that on things like Facebook and Instagram, you do actually have usernames. Instagram, your username is a bit more obvious, but on Facebook, not so much. For instance, we might think that who would I ever give my Facebook page address to? And I think, well, my Facebook page address is facebook.com/clickstarter. I managed to secure that one, but I didn't secure that one in time for Instagram. Instagram, that was taken. So mine is Clickstarter AU. Same with Twitter. I'm not Clickstarter, I'm Clickstarter AU. YouTube, I don't quite have enough yet to be able to qualify for a username, enough followers and enough, but soon I will. LinkedIn, everyone gets username both for their company page and for their personal profile as well. Also on Facebook, you also get a username for your profile as well. So I think mine is I am Dante St. James, because I had a previous hacked account, which just was under Dante St. James, which is now taken. So I can't use that one now. And that's the problem you get with these, is with a lot of the social platforms, you don't get any sort of claim or comeback over others using your name, particularly if your name is the same as someone else's. Well, they got there first, they get it. Or if you've been banned for any reason, you lose your domain, your username, you don't get that back. So for instance, for your business page, you would have an address such as facebook.com/my-business-name. And you get to choose at the time you're building your page to select select a username for that. Now, if you haven't done it already, you can go into your page settings, and it's in one of the general page settings where you can select the name of your business username in there. So you can have that instead of facebook.com/ a hacked up version of the name of your business, then followed by a billion different numbers after it. You don't have to have that. You can just have your business name in there if it's not taken. So for instance, in this word, my business name might be taken, but my -business -name might not be, or my _business_name may not be. What you might do, a lot of people do, they add an AU on the end or an OS at the end, AUS, or they might put PTY-LTD, or some people even put their website address. So they might go mybusinessname.com.au as part of their Facebook username. You can use dots and underscores and all sorts of different characters to form part of your business username for your page on Facebook. The same pretty much goes for Instagram, except in this case, your Instagram address would be instagram.com/ and then whatever your business name is. But quite often the mentions, the way that businesses are mentioned on Instagram is via what we call the @mentions. So it'll be @my-business-name. Now you set that when you first set up your Instagram account. So pretty much everyone knows they've got one of those because they had to do it when they first set up their account. It suggests some for you. But I think when it comes to your business name, try and get to just your name of your business as the main part of it. But if you're like doing something like Fanny Bay Plumbing and Gas Services NT, if that's your business name, you might want to cut that down and say Fanny Bay Plumbing or Fanny Bay Gas or something like that. I had to choose that. Sorry, it's the name of a real place here in the Northern Territory, in case you didn't know. It's quite hilarious. Even more hilarious when you know that Dick Ward Drive goes right through Fanny Bay. So that's one of the little local jokes we have up here. So once you've got Instagram ready, then you look at things like Twitter, which is very much the same thing. Your Twitter is going to be your pretty much the same as what your Instagram is going to be. So my Twitter and my Instagram are the same, which is Clickstarter AU. Or it might be Dante St. James, or whatever you want to have as what your name is or your business name is. And the key here is to try and get these as consistent as possible. Unfortunately, I could get my business name properly in Facebook, but couldn't get it just straight out for Instagram and for Twitter. So I could go, okay, for me, I could go, well, put Clickstarter AU as my username on Facebook as well. So then they're all nice and consistent across them. But I didn't want to give up my actual business name on Facebook, the one place where I could get it for the sake of making it consistent. So be sensible with it, because I wouldn't say give up your name just because you can't get it on the others. I'd say get it on the ones you can, and then add something extra on the ones that you can't seem to get it on. YouTube is, you're going to have to get to a certain level of YouTube to get a username. So like if I look up on Google, how many followers to get YouTube business name, YouTube username. It's like where you got a channel name, where your channel name isn't just like a whole lot of numbers like mine is right now. It's kind of where you get verification, and you have to get a certain amount of them. I can't even remember how much it is. I tried to type it in and say how many it was, but there's a certain amount. I think you've got to have the check mark you get is you have 100,000. This is before you get to that. So it could be around about the 1,000 mark, 1,000 subscribers before you're actually then allowed to have a YouTube channel name. So instead of youtube.com/channel/1273088ABCDXYZ dash etc., you can just have youtube.com/Clickstarter, youtube.com/Dante St. James, youtube.com/Andrew, something like that. You'd be able to have those because you have earned that right on YouTube. So it's important to get that, but you'd have to get a lot of followers up. I'm pretty sure it's about 1,000. Remember, it's about 1,000 subscribers before you get an actual channel username. And you'll be invited to do that once you reach whatever that threshold happens to be. For LinkedIn, your personal page is going to be linkedin.com/in/then your name. You can set that name to be like mine is Dante St. James, but it used to be Dante-ST-James. I squished that all into just Dante St. James because I think it was easy to say. But all I usually say is I've got an uncommon name. So I just tell people, go to LinkedIn and type in my name. You're going to find me. I'm the only one on there. In addition, though, to your personal profile and having a username on there on LinkedIn, you've also got a business name as well for your company page. And that's going to be linkedin.com/company/whatever your business name happens to be. This is a lot less likely to be set as to be taken as what it might be on, say, Facebook or Twitter, because LinkedIn hasn't been around as long and also hasn't been offering company pages for quite as long either. So I usually find it's quite easy to get someone's business name as part of their address in here. Now, is there any advantage necessarily to this? It doesn't make you more findable on LinkedIn at all. You're still going to be just as equally findable with or without a fancy business name in your address like this. But for me, it always makes it easier to say, just go to linkedin.com company/my business name. I usually just say, just look for my business name on LinkedIn. You'll find it anyway. But it just seems nice to have it. It does seem more legit when I look at the company's actually secured their business name on here rather than the long, complicated one with numbers and letters and all that. It does look more legit. It looks like they've at least taken the time to secure that. And that to me feels a lot better. That feels like it's a lot more trustworthy and it has a lot more credibility to it when they've gone to that extra little bit of effort to do at least that. So what happens when these are not available? And this becomes a problem, I guess, when you're dealing with the social platforms, because they don't like conflict. They don't tend to like to enter into disputes between people, except where it, for instance, is going to be to do with misuse. So someone is misusing your name, and you can show that you can prove that you are that person and they are pretending to be you. Or it could be a trademark thing. So if there's a trademark, for instance, where they're using your logo as well as your name, and or you've got the trademark for that name, for the words of that name, not just for the logo, then you're going to have a claim. And they're usually pretty good at following up the trademark ones because that's a legal thing. Trademarks are very legally enforceable, as is copyright. Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, none of them, or TikTok, none of them want to be caught up in court defending against copyright claims and trademark claims. So showing that you have that trademark, showing that you have the rights to that name, showing that you are the person that person is pretending to be, showing that you have a copyright claim on that piece of music, that piece of art, that piece of whatever it is going to help you a long way to get their attention. In some cases, though, you may need to lawyer up. I have had a couple of clients in the past who we've had no luck with getting through to the social platforms, so we've actually had to threaten legal action. And that was handled very quickly when that came through, but it does tend to jump you up the line if you're putting a claim on that. Now, will that claim be that I just want to have access to that username that they're using, and I should have it because that's the name of my business? Is not going to get you anywhere. you really have to have a legal claim to that. And just registering the business name is not enough of a legal claim, because remember, these social platforms, whilst they operate within Australia, are not Australian companies. They do not have to follow Australian business naming rules in order to grant you over someone else access to that particular username on a social platform. Now, whilst a branding person go, oh my God, you need to have your brand secured all over the place, when it really comes down to it, your brand is about how people think about you, how people feel about you, how people remember you when you're not there to remind them. It's not about a logo and a username. You can find all sorts of ways to get around that kind of stuff just by basically making your brand consistent, even if your usernames happen to not be. But if it's really, really super important to you, and you're just being denied that name, not because someone else has got it, but because they don't want you to have it, well, then lawyering up might be an option for you. But it makes you ask the question, is it actually worth all the trouble? If you're looking for a username that's tied to a brand name that's really a common set of words that are used in the English language elsewhere, it might be really close to somebody else's brand name. It may be that you think that P&L Solutions might be your new name for your accountancy firm, but there's already 15 other P&L Solutions. Being really married to that idea of P&L Solutions as being your business name is probably a lot less hassle if you just dump that and go for something else. Create a new name. Use a different variation of that name rather than going to all the trouble trying to claim every P&L Solutions domain name, every P&L Solutions username all over the place, when realistically, the name is not really that worthy. Like, no one's going to remember P&L Solutions. There's very few acronym names that we tend to remember that aren't huge and mega brands like ANZ, NAB, DHL, TNT. They're all very big brands and big names, but the average local accountant or local plumber or local Sparky is using acronyms and letters and, oh, look, I'm going to be, I'm going to combine the first letter of my name and the first letter of my wife's name, and we're going to go, we are J&J Solutions, and think we're somehow being clever and original. You're not. It's one of the least original things you can do with a business name is to do initials in there. Andrew's asking, can that actually be trademarked? Well, yeah, you can trademark the name P&L Solutions. The problem is, though, you'll probably have a lot of trouble getting it through. You'll probably only be able to maybe trademark a logo that contains that, not the actual words themselves, because P and L are just letters of the alphabet. And then it could just be that they are like solutions, is not just another word in the English language. So it'd be very hard to trademark that. It is possible though, like for instance, some businesses, very big businesses in Australia, have been able to trademark their name. So yeah, they may be able to do that, but that may not be the case as well. Even if you apply for and is provisionally approved and you put the little TM after it, doesn't mean that you're going to get it registered. It's about a 12-month period where you're going to have that registration at the end. And that's when you get the little R beside it, as opposed to, like you've said in the chat, Bling Shots trademark, Bling Shots R, which means a registered trademark. So it's not pending trademark, it's now registered and it's fully registered. So when people are trying to write like the word Facebook in the posts to try and get around Facebook taking down their posts or thinking they're pretending to be them, putting a TM after it doesn't do anything. And plus, Facebook is not a pending trademark. Facebook's a registered trademark with an R after it, not a TM. So it's just registering regular words ain't going to work for you, but registering a logo that contains Bling Shots, that could be. And it could be too that there could be another Bling Shots out there. There could be a very close version of it. So if you try to trademark Bling Shots, if it's really similar to an existing word or existing trademark, the existing trademark holder could register it's like someone wanting to put up a new building next to your building. You can what's the word I'm looking for? You can appeal against it, or you can put a complaint against it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get through. Just because someone says, well, I've got slingshots I've got a trademark slingshots and they want bling shots, they may or may not approve that. And you may need to go to the point where you go, actually, I'm not going to get this through on my own through the trademark, through ASIC. I'm going to have to go a little bit further and have this registered using IP attorneys or IP lawyers, intellectual property lawyers, and trademark lawyers to do that for us. It's a whole skill set that's well outside of mine. I couldn't even begin to advise you on what's right or wrong with that, because there's so many things that could go horribly wrong in that. But I would always say that it's worth spending $3,000 on an intellectual property lawyer to get the right advice and do it the right way, and what it is to do it the wrong way and then find yourself in legal trouble down the track. And $3,000 does seem like a lot, but that can actually, yeah. And like Andrew's saying, it's not really a priority at the moment. So it's something we should look at much further down the track if you really need to. So the idea is here to go, is it worth the trouble of me doing this and securing my brand? I'd say in domain names, because they're so cheap usually, do it. I'd say in social media usernames, if they're available, do it. If they're not, have a variation on it. I just chuck AU on the end of mine. Just to sort of secure that, yes, this is my business and it's the Australian version of it. Someone sees AU, they see Australia. So if you see Australia, you go, oh yeah, that's definitely the Australian version of this particular name and company. So therefore I'm kind of making it known that I'm the Australian one. So if you're Australian and you're looking for that, you recognize that as being the Aussie version of that company name.